Sometimes the most painful betrayals come from the people we trust the most, the ones we welcome into our homes and our hearts. My name is Sarah, and I'm 31 years old now, though I was 29 when this nightmare began. I live in a small city in Pennsylvania, and this is the story of how my entire world turned upside down because of something so bizarre, so unthinkable, that even now, years later, I sometimes can't believe it actually happened to me. I met my husband, Michael, when I was 19, during our sophomore year at Penn State. He was studying mechanical engineering, and I was majoring in communications. We met at a campus coffee shop where I was cramming for midterms, and he accidentally spilled his entire iced coffee on my laptop bag. Most people would have been furious, but something about his genuine panic and the way he immediately offered to pay for any damage made me laugh instead. He spent the next 3 hours helping me review my notes, which he'd photocopied at the library while I dried out my bag. That was Michael in a nutshell. Always trying to fix things, always taking care of everyone around him. We dated throughout college, and our relationship felt like one of those fairy tales you see in movies. He was my best friend, my study partner, my adventure companion. We'd spend weekends exploring hiking trails around State College, trying every pizza place within a 20-mile radius and dreaming about our future together. His family was enormous. He was the ninth of 10 boys. Can you imagine? Coming from my small family of just me and my 2 younger sisters, Emma and Lily, his family gatherings were overwhelming at first. But I loved how close they all seemed, how his mother Patricia would fuss over everyone, how his brothers would tease each other mercilessly but still show up whenever anyone needed help. After I graduated, a semester before Michael, since I'd taken summer classes, I decided to take a gap semester to travel. I'd saved up money from working at the campus bookstore and wanted to see Europe before settling into adult life. Michael was completely supportive, even though it meant we'd be apart for months. He helped me plan my itinerary, made sure I had backup copies of all my documents, and drove me to the airport with tears in his eyes. Those 4 months backpacking through hostels and eating street food were incredible, but I missed him every single day. We video called whenever Wi-Fi allowed, and he'd show me his progress on his senior project, some complicated robotics system that I pretended to understand. When I came back, tanned and full of stories, Michael was supposed to have graduated so we could move to Philadelphia together where he had a job offer. But he'd had to repeat 2 courses, thermodynamics and fluid mechanics, after getting too distracted helping his youngest brother through some personal issues. This is where everything started, though I didn't know it at the time. Since I had nowhere to live and had already given up my apartment before traveling, Michael suggested I move in with him and his brother Alex, who was 30 at the time and sharing a rental house near campus. Now, Alex was different from the other brothers. Where Michael and most of his siblings were outgoing and warm, Alex was quiet and a bit odd. He worked from home as a freelance programmer, rarely left the house except for necessities, and had this way of looking at you that made you feel like he was cataloging everything about you. But he was Michael's closest brother, the one who'd protected him from the older boys' teasing when they were kids, and Michael absolutely adored him. When I asked if it was okay to bring my cat, Oliver, a beautiful black rescue I'd adopted my junior year, both brothers said it was fine. It was, but he said it was, Oliver, he looked, I sat, but even, instead, her react, that night, when he arrived, I showed him the video without preamble. I'll never forget the way his face changed as he watched. Confusion, recognition, horror, and then a deep, crushing sadness. He watched it 3 times, as if hoping he'd see something different, before putting the phone down and pulling me into his arms. "I'm so sorry," he whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry." What followed was one of the most difficult periods of our relationship. Michael confronted Alex that night while I stayed at Jessica's. According to Michael, Alex initially denied everything, then tried to minimize it, saying it was just a prank that got out of hand. When Michael wouldn't accept that explanation, Alex broke down and admitted he'd been trying to drive me away. He saw me as a threat to his relationship with Michael, the one person who'd always protected him from their older brother's bullying. The story that came out over the following weeks was heartbreaking and disturbing in equal measure. The 10 brothers had not had an easy childhood. Their father, Richard, was a strict disciplinarian with a terrible temper, and their mother, Patricia, had learned to look the other way to keep the peace. The older brothers had tormented the younger ones relentlessly, locking them in closets, forcing them to sleep outside, destroying their belongings. Michael had been Alex's only defender, the only one who would stand up to the older boys, despite being younger himself. This dynamic had created an unhealthy dependence in Alex. He'd never learned to form normal relationships, never dated, never really had friends outside of online gaming communities. Michael was his entire world, and when I came along, he felt that world threatening to collapse. The pandemic had made everything worse. With Michael and I spending all our time together in lockdown, Alex felt more isolated than ever. But understanding the why didn't make the what any less violating or disturbing. This wasn't a child acting out. This was a 32-year-old man who had deliberately and repeatedly violated my personal space in the most degrading way possible. And worse, he'd tried to make me doubt my own perceptions and blame my innocent pet. Michael was devastated. He arranged for Alex to stay with their parents while he figured out what to do. I remained at Jessica's for 2 weeks, while Michael and I had long, difficult conversations about our future. Part of me wanted to run, to leave this entire mess behind and start fresh somewhere else. But I loved Michael, and I could see how much this was destroying him. He'd already started looking into therapy for himself and was encouraging Alex to do the same. Eventually, I agreed to move back, but only after Alex's things were completely removed and the entire house was professionally cleaned. We finished out the lease in tense cooperation, with Michael being extra attentive and careful around me, both of us walking on eggshells. When he finally graduated, we moved to Philadelphia as planned, but something had fundamentally shifted in our relationship. We tried to move forward. We found a beautiful apartment in Fishtown. I got a great job at a public relations firm, and Michael started his engineering career. On the surface, we were the young professional couple living our dream, but the shadow of what had happened lingered. Michael struggled with guilt, feeling responsible for not seeing the signs of his brother's instability. I struggled with trust, finding myself suspicious of his family and protective of my belongings in ways I'd never been before. The family dynamics became increasingly complicated. When Michael's mother found out what had happened, she tried to minimize it, saying boys would be boys and that I should be more understanding of Alex's difficulties. This led to a huge fight between Michael and his mother, with him defending me fiercely but also being torn apart by the family division. Some brothers sided with us, appalled by Alex's behavior. Others thought we were overreacting to what they called a prank gone wrong. We went to couples therapy, which helped somewhat. Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, was a kind woman in her 60s who helped us process the trauma and work on rebuilding trust. But even she seemed shocked by the situation, once commenting that in 30 years of practice, she'd never encountered anything quite like it. We learned communication techniques, worked through Michael's family enmeshment issues, and tried to establish healthy boundaries. Despite everything, we got married 2 years later. It was supposed to be a small ceremony, just immediate family and close friends, but Michael's mother insisted on a large wedding. "I have 10 sons," she said, "and you're denying me the chance to celebrate properly?" Against my better judgment, we agreed to a bigger event. The wedding planning was a nightmare. Patricia insisted that all the brothers be in the wedding party, including Alex. When I objected, she accused me of trying to destroy their family. Michael was caught in the middle, wanting to support me but also feeling obligated to include his brother. We compromised. Alex would be a groomsman but wouldn't give a speech and would have minimal interaction with me. The wedding day itself was beautiful on the surface. I wore my grandmother's pearls and a dress I'd found at a vintage shop in Philadelphia. My sisters were my bridesmaids, looking gorgeous in dusty rose dresses. The ceremony was in a historic barn in the Pennsylvania countryside, with string lights and wildflowers everywhere. But underneath the prettiness was an undercurrent of tension that I'm sure our guests could feel. Alex stood with the other groomsmen, avoiding eye contact with me throughout the ceremony. During the reception, he stayed on the opposite side of the room, surrounded by brothers who seemed to be keeping him in check. I tried to focus on the joy of marrying Michael, on my family's love and support, on the friends who'd traveled to celebrate with us. But part of me felt like a fraud, pretending everything was normal when it so clearly wasn't. The moment that stays with me from that day wasn't the first dance or cutting the cake. It was when I went to use the bathroom during the reception and found my cousin's 5-year-old daughter crying in the hallway. When I asked what was wrong, she said one of the big boys had told her she couldn't use the bathroom until she said a bad word. My blood ran cold. I found out later it was one of Michael's older brothers, not Alex, but it reinforced what I was beginning to understand about this family. There was something deeply wrong with how these men had been raised. After the wedding, Michael and I tried to establish a normal married life. We adopted another cat, a sweet calico we named Rosie, who became Oliver's best friend. We took weekend trips to the Poconos, hosted dinner parties for our friends, and started talking about maybe buying a house. But we were careful to keep our distance from his family, only seeing them at major holidays and always staying in hotels rather than with relatives. For a while, this worked. Michael threw himself into his career, getting promoted quickly and working on innovative projects. I was doing well at my job too, managing social media campaigns for major clients and building a reputation in the industry. We were saving money, planning for the future, even tentatively discussing children, though that conversation always led back to concerns about his family's influence. Then, about 3 years after the original incident, everything exploded. It started with a phone call from Michael's brother Daniel, the fourth oldest. Daniel was a high school biology teacher, married with one daughter, and generally one of the more stable brothers. He called Michael late one night, speaking in hushed tones, saying there was something Michael needed to know about Alex. It turned out that Alex's behavior toward me wasn't an isolated incident. During a family gathering we'd skipped, after too much drinking, Alex had made some disturbing comments about women in general and me in particular. But what really set off alarm bells was when Daniel's 14-year-old daughter, Sophia, mentioned that Uncle Alex had been messaging her on Instagram. Nothing inappropriate yet, but enough to make Daniel uncomfortable. When Daniel had confronted Alex about it, Alex had laughed it off. But then Daniel found something that changed everything. While helping his parents clean out their garage, he discovered a box of Alex's old things from high school, including notebooks filled with disturbing writings about female classmates, detailed fantasies about humiliation and control, and what appeared to be a hit list of girls who had rejected or ignored him. Michael was devastated. He'd spent years believing that his brother's actions toward me were an isolated incident born of jealousy and poor coping skills. The idea that Alex had potentially been harboring these feelings toward women for decades, that there might be other victims, was almost too much to bear. We spent that night holding each other, both of us crying, as the full weight of what we'd been dealing with became clear. The family imploded after that. When Daniel brought his concerns to the other brothers, battle lines were drawn. The older brothers, Robert, James, and Christopher, insisted that Daniel was overreacting, that teenage writings didn't mean anything. The middle brothers were split, with some believing Alex needed serious help and others thinking everyone was being dramatic. Michael's mother, Patricia, was the worst, accusing Daniel of trying to destroy Alex out of jealousy and threatening to cut off anyone who turned against family. The situation escalated when William, the sixth brother, admitted that Alex had been staying with him and his wife intermittently, and during those stays, items of his wife's had gone missing. Underwear, jewelry, personal items. They'd assumed they were misplacing things, but now they wondered. William's wife, Maria, was horrified and demanded Alex never be allowed near their home again. That's when we learned the full extent of Patricia's enabling. She'd been covering for Alex for years, paying for an apartment when he couldn't hold down jobs, making excuses for his inability to maintain relationships, even paying off a woman who'd threatened to file a restraining order against him in his 20s. The family's secrets came pouring out like water from a broken dam. Michael made the difficult decision to cut off contact with most of his family. We kept in touch with Daniel, William, and Thomas, the sixth brother, who had also distanced themselves after everything came to light. But the others, especially his mother, were too toxic to maintain relationships with. It was the hardest thing I'd ever watched Michael do. This man who valued family above almost everything, choosing to walk away to protect our life together. The stress took its toll. Michael started having panic attacks, waking up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. He threw himself into work as a coping mechanism, staying at the office until late, taking on project after project. I watched the light in his eyes dim, the easy laugh I'd fallen in love with becoming rare. He started seeing a therapist, Dr. Chen, who specialized in family trauma, but progress was slow. I was struggling too. The revelation about Alex's long history of disturbing behavior made me question everything. Had there been signs I'd missed? Were there other victims who'd never come forward? I found myself looking over my shoulder constantly, installing security cameras in our apartment, even though Alex lived states away. I couldn't shake the feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. And then it did. About 6 months after the family explosion, I came home from work to find a package on our doorstep with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. You deserve to know the truth about who you married. My hands shook as I plugged the drive into our laptop. It contained hundreds of photos of me, pictures taken through our apartment windows, photos from my social media accounts that had been edited in disturbing ways, images of me from college that I'd never seen before. The earliest ones dated back to when Michael and I first started dating. The most recent were from just weeks ago, but the most chilling part was a document titled The Plan. In it, Alex had detailed his systematic campaign to break Michael and me up, starting from when we first got together. The urination was just one tactic. He'd also been spreading rumors about me to the other brothers, creating fake social media accounts to try to catfish Michael, even attempting to hire someone to seduce me. Most of it had failed, but the document showed a level of obsession and planning that made my skin crawl. When Michael came home that night, I was sitting in the dark, laptop closed, trying to process what I'd seen. I didn't want to show him. He'd been doing so much better lately, and I knew this would destroy him. But I also couldn't keep it from him. We were partners, and secrets had no place in our marriage. His reaction was worse than I'd imagined. He didn't cry or rage, he just went completely quiet, scrolling through everything with a blank. He didn't cry or rage, he just went completely quiet, scrolling through everything with a blank expression that scared me more than any emotional outburst would have. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I did this to you. I brought this into your life. That began the darkest period of our marriage. Michael fell into a deep depression, barely eating, calling in sick to work, spending days in bed staring at nothing. I tried everything, bringing him his favorite foods, planning activities, even flying my parents up from Florida to talk to him. Nothing worked. He was drowning in guilt and self-loathing, convinced that loving him had ruined my life. I took time off work to take care of him, but I was running on empty myself. The constant vigilance, the worry about Michael, the fear that Alex might escalate, it was too much. I started having my own panic attacks, breaking down in grocery store aisles, unable to sleep without checking the locks multiple times. We were both falling apart. The turning point came when I found Michael in the bathroom with a bottle of sleeping pills, just staring at them. He insisted he wasn't going to do anything, that he was just thinking. But I knew we couldn't go on like this. I called his therapist, who recommended immediate hospitalization. Michael didn't fight it. I think he was relieved to have someone else take control. He spent 2 weeks in an inpatient psychiatric facility. I visited every day, bringing him books and updates about our cats, trying to remind him of all the good in our lives. Slowly, with intensive therapy and medication adjustments, he started to resurface. The day he smiled at one of my terrible jokes was the day I finally let myself hope we might get through this. When he came home, things were different. We were more intentional about our healing, more protective of our peace. We moved to a new apartment with better security, changed our phone numbers, and went completely no contact with his entire family, except for the 3 brothers who had supported us. We even changed our last name, legally becoming the Winters instead of keeping his family name. But the universe wasn't done testing us. A year later, just as we were finding our equilibrium, I got a call that would shatter everything we'd rebuilt. Thomas, one of the brothers we'd stayed in contact with, called to tell us that Alex had been arrested. Not for anything involving me, but for attempting to break into the home of a female colleague who'd rejected his advances. When police searched his apartment, they found what Thomas delicately called a shrine to multiple women, including me. The trial was a nightmare. I had to testify about my experiences, reliving the violation and fear in front of strangers. Michael's family was split, with some supporting Alex and others finally acknowledging the severity of his issues. Patricia paid for an expensive lawyer who tried to paint Alex as a troubled man who just needed help, not prison. She even had the audacity to approach me outside the courthouse, begging me to drop the charges, even though I wasn't the one pressing them, and saying I was destroying her family. Alex was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment. It should have felt like justice, but mostly it just felt empty. The damage was done to my sense of safety, to Michael's relationship with his family, to our ability to trust. You can't undo years of violation with a court verdict. Michael took the verdict harder than I did. He started talking about divorce, saying I deserved better, that I should find someone without his baggage. He couldn't forgive himself for bringing Alex into my life, for not seeing the signs sooner, for all the pain his family had caused me. No matter how many times I told him I chose him, that we were in this together, he couldn't shake the guilt. We separated for 6 months, not because I wanted to, but because Michael insisted he needed to work on himself without dragging me down. He moved in with a friend, threw himself into intensive therapy, and started attending support groups for family members of people with personality disorders. I was heartbroken, but tried to respect his needs. During those 6 months, I learned a lot about myself. I'd been so focused on supporting Michael, on surviving the chaos of his family, that I'd lost sight of who I was outside of this drama. I started my own intensive therapy, reconnected with college friends I'd lost touch with, even took a solo trip to Seattle to visit my sister Emma. I discovered I was stronger than I'd thought, but also that I didn't want to be strong alone. I wanted my partner back. We started dating again, like we were new people getting to know each other. Coffee dates that reminded me of our college days, long walks in Fairmount Park, tentative conversations about our dreams and fears. It was during one of these walks that Michael finally forgave himself, or at least started to. I keep thinking about freshman year, he said, watching the ducks on the Schuylkill River. If I could go back, would I avoid you to spare you all this? And I realized I can't imagine any version of my life without you in it. We renewed our vows on our 5th anniversary, just the two of us and an officiant on a beach in Maine. No family drama, no obligations, just us recommitting to facing whatever came next together. We'd both been broken by what happened, but we'd chosen to heal together rather than apart. That was 2 years ago. These days, our life looks quiet from the outside, and that's exactly how we like it. We bought a small house in the suburbs with a garden where I grow tomatoes and herbs. We have 3 cats now, Oliver, Rosie, and a senior rescue named Mabel, who mostly sleeps in sunbeams. Michael works for a company developing sustainable energy solutions, finally using his engineering skills for something that makes him proud. I started my own social media consulting business, choosing my clients carefully and maintaining strict boundaries. We still don't have contact with most of Michael's family. His mother sends letters sometimes, full of manipulation and guilt trips that go straight into the trash. We hear updates occasionally from the brothers we still talk to. Alex is out of prison and living in a halfway house, supposedly getting treatment but still maintaining his innocence. Other brothers have had their own scandals and dramas, reinforcing our decision to stay away. The hardest part is the holidays. Michael misses the big chaotic gatherings of his childhood before he understood how toxic they were. We've created our own traditions instead. Friendsgiving with our chosen family, Christmas morning volunteering at the animal shelter, New Year's Eve hosting a small party for the people who've stood by us. It's different, but it's ours. We're even starting to talk about children again. For years, the idea terrified me. What if they inherited whatever was wrong with Michael's family? What if we couldn't protect them? But our therapist has helped us understand that cycles can be broken, that awareness and intentionality can create a different outcome. We're not there yet, but we're opening ourselves to the possibility. Looking back, I sometimes can't believe this all started with a strange smell in our bedroom. How something so bizarre, so seemingly small, could unravel into years of trauma and revelation. But I've learned that the strangest details often signal the deepest problems. Alex urinating on my belongings wasn't really about marking territory or jealousy. It was about control, humiliation, and a deep-seated hatred that had been festering for years. I've also learned about the insidious nature of family dysfunction, how abuse gets minimized as boys being boys, or sibling rivalry, how mothers enable to avoid confronting their failures, how victims become perpetrators if the cycle isn't broken. Michael's family was a masterclass in generational trauma, and we got caught in its undertow. But mostly, I've learned about resilience, about the strength of choosing love even when it comes with unbearable complications, about the power of therapy and boundaries and chosen family, about forgiving yourself for not seeing red flags and forgiving your partner for coming from chaos, about building something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. I still have bad days. Certain smells make me panic. I check our security cameras more than is probably healthy. Sometimes I wake up angry at Michael for things that aren't his fault, and sometimes he retreats into guilt spirals that take days to break. We're not perfect, and we're not over it. I don't think you ever fully get over something like this. You just learn to carry it better. But we have more good days than bad now. Mornings where we drink coffee in our garden and plan vegetable placements. Evenings cooking together, dancing badly to 90s music in our kitchen. Weekends exploring farmers markets and hiking trails, building a life that's intentionally peaceful and ours. We've earned this quiet joy through surviving chaos, and we protect it fiercely. I share this story not because I need sympathy or validation anymore, but because I know there are others out there dealing with toxic families, bizarre violations, partners who come with complicated baggage. You're not crazy for staying, and you're not weak for struggling. Sometimes love means fighting through unimaginable circumstances. Sometimes it means walking away. Only you can decide which is right for your situation. What I can tell you is this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone gaslight you into doubting your own perceptions. Set boundaries and enforce them, even when especially when family is involved. Get therapy if you can afford it. If you can't, find support groups or online communities. You don't have to carry these burdens alone. And remember that healing isn't linear. You'll have setbacks and breakthroughs sometimes in the same day. You'll think you're over something only to have it resurface years later. That's okay. Trauma is sneaky like that. The goal isn't to forget what happened or pretend it didn't affect you. The goal is to build a life where the trauma becomes just one part of your story, not the defining chapter. As I finish writing this, Oliver is curled up in my lap, purring his little heart out. He never did mark his territory, by the way. He's still the perfect gentleman cat I adopted all those years ago. Sometimes I whisper apologies to him for ever doubting him, and he just purrs louder, forgiving me instantly in the way only animals can. Michael just got home from work, and I can hear him greeting the cats, starting dinner, humming some song he probably heard on his commute. These ordinary moments are what we fought for, what we protected, what we rebuilt from ruins. They're worth more than any big dramatic gesture because we chose them deliberately, created them intentionally, and guard them carefully. Our story didn't end with the revelation of Alex's betrayal, or even with his imprisonment. It continues every day in small acts of trust and love and choosing each other. Some days that choice is easy, and some days it takes everything we have. But we keep choosing, keep building, keep believing that we deserve the peaceful life we've created. If you've made it this far, thank you for witnessing our journey. May you find your own peace, whatever that looks like for you. May you trust your instincts and enforce your boundaries. May you surround yourself with people who respect and protect your well-being. And may you never, ever have to wonder if your cat is peeing on your belongings, because I can assure you, if you're wondering, it's probably not the cat.